From the NYU Kimmel Center, Consumer Reports presents Facebook and Your Privacy, what every consumer should know in the age of social networking.
It's a really tough subject to talk about, a lot of issues all operating in parallel, and I'm going to focus on the things that people normally don't focus about when they do talk about privacy. For those of you who aren't as aged as I am, someone who's not entering their sunset years like myself or Jim here, that's a plastic pocket protector. I did wear one of those and thick black glasses when I was in high school. And when you're a nerd in high school and you remember what it feels like to feel left out, not as bad as I remember, but when you learn to feel that way, if you're lucky, you remember how it felt, and that drives my urge to try to get as inclusive as possible for everyone on the net. Nowadays, I like to think of myself as the Lady Gaga of the nerds. The stuff isn't understood very well. Both privacy and how it relates to cybersecurity as well. You know, you hear a lot about what's going on in the news, lots of laws being proposed, killed, that kind of stuff. And frankly, no one in the industry so far explains a lot of these issues very well, which creates a lot of the confusion around things. Because Facebook, Google, a lot of services allow you to fine-tune how much privacy you have or don't have, but it's hard to do that. Breaking news, in fact, is that the Consumer Reports explanation of Facebook privacy issues is really good and even acknowledged so by some folks I've spoken to at Facebook. So this effort, which has become a kind of de facto industry and privacy advocate thing, it's actually making real progress along these lines, and that ain't bad. You might hear that Google got a fine, a slap on the wrist really, because as they're measuring Wi-Fi around the country, an engineer just decided for fun to record unencrypted Wi-Fi messages. The deal is this is just a guy screwing around. It's not as bad as a vaguely related blunder I made in 1995, which I won't tell you about. But sometimes we just plain screw up, and you gotta face the consequences. It was really embarrassing in 1995, and it would be even more so now. Part of the problem is that if you, an industry, a website, if you don't explain things well enough, I feel that you don't have informed consent, and that drives a lot of this stuff. The idea, and here I'm on a little bit of a tangent, in an attempt at being witty, I said a couple years ago that the press should be the immune system of democracy. When there's misinformation going around, or even yet deliberate disinformation, the press should say, hey, this isn't right, let's correct things. But given the current and evolving news model, very little fact-checking is done these days. So if a politician or let's say a writer writing in haste says something about information or says something about privacy which is wrong, it'll get out there and people will accept it as the gospel truth. Now, the current Consumer Reports article published as of today has a lot of good information in there because Consumer Reports does fact-checking like almost no one else does. The institutions that rival Consumer Reports are like the New Yorker or The Daily Show. Fart jokes and all, The Daily Show adheres to professional ethics as well as anyone does these days. My advisors have just had me reread the Code of Ethics from the Society of Professional Journalists, and it's shocking. Do you know that in the Code of Ethics it says that you're not supposed to make things up? Who'd have thought? But the deal is that even in the article, it requires a lot more explanation because when you check into something, it's not like you're advertising your presence to potential burglars, but you got to be careful when it comes to stuff like website or smartphone apps, because sometimes they can leak information and they don't tell you what's being leaked, and that's the problem right there. This is a big issue in a lot of ways. I found myself chatting with folks without being really conscious that these guys were the decision makers for the Departments of State, Defense, and Homeland Security, because they had the same quandary about people leaking information. For example, if you're a diplomat, you really don't want to tell people on your Facebook page what hotel you're staying at overseas. That could be awkward. So the deal is there's a lot of good stuff going on, and in particular I admire the work of Dana Boyd, and her name is all lowercase, just like Craigslist is all lowercase. But she is probably the most knowledgeable person in a lot of these areas, and one of her offices is a couple blocks away at NYU. The problem with a lot of disinformation is what people call moral panic, meaning you post some stuff, you get people too excited, there's a lot of alarmist stuff out there, and, well, some years ago, 10 years ago or so, a lot of disinformation, which led to the unfortunate adventure of invading the wrong country. That was certainly awkward. More recently this year, there was some bad legislation, SOPA, like Stop Internet Piracy. You know, there's some real stuff there, because it's not really fair for people to pirate copyrighted material. How are writers going to make any kind of money, or people who write movies or who produce the movies? But the way that law was written, in a panic, meant that, you know, you could use that law as an excuse to pretty much take down any site with user-generated content. And that could not only involve places like Facebook, but if you had a blog with comments, with user comments, somebody could actually intentionally put comments in there which alluded to copyrighted material, and the way the law was getting written, somebody could take down your site without much recourse, putting you out of business with that kind of law. We see a lot of stuff going on there, and the problem is that sometimes politicians or other people in government need a hand. The first step is to get everyone to chill. The first step is to talk to people and let them know that, hey, what you're hearing from lobbyists and so on may not be accurate. They may actually be paid intentionally to deceive you. In World War II, they printed up a bunch of these in Britain, and that's the message for a lot of this stuff. There are real problems in cybersecurity. There are real problems in privacy, but one of the first steps is to keep your head and then make decisions based on real information. Find out when somebody's disinforming you, and just keep going on. This all revolves on the internet between social contracts between people in the industry and people who use those sites. The internet industry basically makes a social contract between all the users of that code and then themselves. The idea is that, you know, companies like Google or Facebook or Yelp or Foursquare, they're basically saying, hey, we're going to provide a useful service to you, and in return, you know, please provide us with some personal information. And they say, well, they'll treat it respectfully, they won't disclose anything, you know, along those lines. Sometimes it has happened by accident. But, you know, the internet industry, especially Google, they say, don't be evil, you know, and they follow through with that. The oversight needed in many cases is that of informed consent. They need to tell you clearly how they're going to use your personal information, and sometimes, especially when they're trying to make it easier and clearer to you, sometimes they actually make things much more confusing. That's the way things work sometimes. Remember, this idea of a social contract is not new. The way broadcast TV works is that they're going to give you free content, free programs, in return for the possibility that you may watch advertisements. And sometimes, of course, we learn how to use 30-second skip, but the original social contract is we give you something, you get, we want something back. When it comes to the government, and the idea that sometimes government will need personal identifying information in return for what government needs to do, and there, the oversight is in the form of the Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights. Stuff like the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. When it comes to banking and stuff like that, there's the Consumer Financial Protection Board. So sometimes, again, the government really does need some personal information to protect you. They have all that oversight for judges to decide if they should sign the subpoena or not. And that kind of stuff is real. There are protections in place. Sometimes there's more that's needed as technology and the law evolves, sometimes not. Click. The bottom line, though, is that to some extent, there is a loss of privacy already. You go online and you Google yourself, you search and search more, and you're going to find stuff on yourself that maybe shouldn't be there. There's a lot of firms who operate in gray areas where they put publicly accessible data about you, and maybe they do so in ways that are not exactly legal, not exactly illegal, and that's an area in where the laws need to evolve. The people in these panels know a lot more about that than I do. The problems are things like when it comes to credit firms. They're supposed to correct misinformation about you. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and it gets complicated when there's people, for example, with the same name as you have. There's a Craig Newmark who's a professor of economics in North Carolina. His wedding announcement appeared in my local paper when we both lived in South Florida. Of course, that's when my mother chooses to visit. Wackiness ensues. Something I haven't told my colleagues at Consumer Reports is that I'll be getting married at the end of this year. Assuming she, my fiancée, doesn't come to her senses. I found her, if you read about what I do, I hang out at a specific cafe back in San Francisco a lot. That's where we met. Notice that there is a generation gap, a genuine one when it comes to privacy. Millennials, people 30 years older or younger, including Mark Zuckerberg, feel a lot differently than people who are older than that about privacy. Millennials are stereotypically much more open than we are, especially guys like Jim and myself who are entering our sunset years. I'm referring to Jim, who I like to call the old man of Consumer Reports. Some people speculate that there's going to be so much of our lives on the net that we're going to get desensitized to that through repeated exposure. Think about how much CCTV there is around town, especially if you're in a place like London or parts of Manhattan. At some point, we may just get used to it, and if something embarrassing is exposed about us, maybe it's not that embarrassing anymore. In another attempt, I like to say that trust is the new black, meaning that online, it's true, something that's been true of us forever. We rely a lot on trust. Right now, we trust Google, Facebook, a lot of companies that they're going to do the right thing and not sell our personal information, not pull a fast one in a lot of regards. And actually through repeated exposure to the people who work at Google, Facebook, and a lot of places, I do trust them. But I think of my current thinking, when I think of now, I'm actually thinking of now through 20 years. And as a nerd, I'm a science fiction reader, so I'm thinking also about the next couple hundred years. And the idea is that, you trust the practices of different companies. What protections have they put in place that will survive the current people running things, people of goodwill? How will the people running things in 20 years be guaranteed, perhaps, to be people of goodwill? Those are things to think about a lot, because the decisions we make today will affect us or our children in 200 years. The idea is that we're trying to get stuff done. Again, there's a lot of problems that we're seeing. A lot of politicians right now who are saying things about privacy or cybersecurity. Some of them may not have any idea what they're talking about, but if they can say something and have a TV camera come around and listen to them and do some video where we're going to hear some really dumb stuff happening. And you know, this is an election year, so the amount of dumb stuff we're hearing is not going to get less. It may start to subside on November 6th. But actually, we may be better off if we need legislation on privacy and cybersecurity. It's really important. But no legislation, I think, is better than bad legislation. That was the whole thing with SOPA and so on. I think this gives the industry a lot of breathing space to do stuff along the theme of informed consent and that social contract. That is, companies will give you good services, you know, but it must be met with informed consent. They need to tell you what's going on. I'm thinking that what I may suggest to the big guys, that they provide tools which show you what cookies they're using, what kind of technology you're using, so it shows you exactly what's going on. There's a good article a couple years ago in the Wall Street Journal which showed what was happening back then, but the industry has moved on in those 2 years. So I may just push for that kind of stuff. The deal is that the internet has no lobby. The idea is that the people who use the internet really have no one representing them who actually know what's going on. People in our industry, people of goodwill, are getting together saying, hey, we got together with that SOPA stuff, what's next? A week ago at Union Square Ventures, just blocks from here, a bunch of people active in this kind of thing got together saying something needs to get better. Clay Shirky, who's notable in this movement, says maybe we need an internet volunteer fire department. When something really terrible is about to happen, we need to get together in a hurry to stop it. Maybe that's what's going to happen. And you know, as a result of preparation for this talk, plus some other work I'm doing involving election protection, I'm pretty much deciding that I'm going to join them, that I'm going to stand up, because, you know, like they say, a nerd's got to do what a nerd's got to do. And so I guess what I'm doing is publicly committing to talking to people and following through and making happen what I can make happen. I'm going to do a lot more, and you're going to hear about it a lot less, because sometimes a nerd is much more effective when he keeps his mouth shut. So here's the big message to leave you with. There are a lot of issues when it comes to privacy and cybersecurity. There's a lot of disinformation out there, a lot of it coming from Washington, a lot of it coming from industry groups, a lot of it coming from lobbyists. But if we stay chill, then we may get a lot of good results. I'll just conclude by reminding people as a nerd, live long and prosper. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful. And I have got to say that I was floored by the announcement of the wedding. I can't wait for the online, the online gift site to appear. And I will say that I have met Craig in his normal hangout, which, without disclosing it fully, is on Cole Street in San Francisco. And he is absolutely one of the regulars, and you can see why. He's terrific. We are now going to talk about the package that Consumer Reports did, which is kind of the trigger for this. And the package is part of this ongoing series in Consumer Reports, which this is actually our 8th year for what we call our State of the Net coverage. And the State of the Net is essentially it's a piece of survey research done by the Consumer Reports National Research Center. And I should also want to point out that Donato Vaccaro, who was the head of that study, is the gentleman with his hand up over there. So if you'd like to talk to him about how it was done. But basically, we have a panel of people that we query, who are active, many of them active Facebook users in this particular case, but they're active online. And then from that, we then try to project that against, you know, the national audience, so we have a sense of, we'll try to figure out, well, if you know, X% of people in our survey told us they did such and such, we try to project, well, what would that mean if we projected that against, you know, the full, you know, United States population, the portion of it that we know to be active here, what would that actually mean? And that always produces some interesting answers. And I wanted to focus on just a couple of those this year, pardon me, that are unrelated to Facebook. But ID theft. 15.9 million people said that they had somebody in their household had experienced ID theft within the last year, and that is actually up from the previous year, which is not a happy statistic. Phishing schemes were kind of flat, but it's still, we're talking 9.1 million people when you project it out, unauthorized charges, and of course malware, which is you know, perennial problem on the web and always has been. But this year we actually did a little further examination in some detail of Facebook. Now, why did we pick Facebook? There's no surprise there. Facebook is 900 plus million users worldwide, as I think everybody here will be familiar with, 188 million plus users in the US and Canada. It is the defining site for this new social age that we are, you know, very much in already, and I think everybody here will be, you know, obviously thoroughly familiar with that. This is, you know, and I would say that Facebook and others like it, but Facebook, largely because of its size being probably the most visible, are creating this new way for people to relate and interact globally, and it's just wonderful. It truly is, and it is, and watching this, you know, born over the last, you know, 5 or 6 years has been like, for those of you who were there for the early internet, it's been like watching the early web when you just saw all this stuff that you said, my God, that's so amazing. But it also tosses up, because they are creating this new world as they go, Facebook and others, as they go, they create tools and services that, like all tools and services, have both a happy side and in some cases a little bit of a downside. And these are some of the ones that we you know, in our survey we identified as ones that at least would give us some cause for concern. That there are, by our estimate, something like 13 million US Facebook users who don't use or are not even aware of the site's privacy tools, which we think is critical. Now, you may say, I actually want to be totally public, and there are many cases where that makes a lot of sense, but it's a choice you should be making, an informed choice, we think. 7 million households who said they had some kind of problems last year, you know, ranging from tiny things to things that could be potentially serious. This point about people posting when they're going to go out, and I just want to make this really clear. You know, it is not like if you went on your Facebook page and you put down, gee, I'm going to Houston next week, and I'll see you guys when I get back. And you're broadcasting that to your friends. Does this mean your house is going to get broken into? You know, look, the odds of that are fairly low, but I'll tell you what it's like, and I can tell you from having raised a kid in the city. When I was raising, my wife and I were raising our daughter in the city, what we always would tell her is, you have to exercise normal urban caution. So just like you wouldn't go down to the dry cleaner on the corner, and even if the guy's a friend of yours, say, hey, Fred, we're going to be in Houston next week, because you don't know who else might be listening, you need to understand that on Facebook, if you have not been careful about how you set your privacy permissions, and if your friends have not been careful about how they set theirs, it is in fact possible for information that you post to reach people that you may or may not have intended it to reach. And are the odds of that high? They aren't huge, but they are there. And it's something that, at least for the people that Consumer Reports serves, are something that people should be aware of, and that was the reason why we focused on some of these numbers. It is not to create a moral panic. The other thing that we're very interested in, I'm throwing up some of these stats, but I'll just tell you my own kind of personal view of this. To me, the really interesting thing about Facebook is that unlike many other social media sites that are still kind of really almost broadcast sites, although they have a connectivity to them, and Facebook has a connectivity, a broadcast element too, Facebook is more like a little, it's like an amazing set of little walled gardens which overlap. You know, you can think of kind of the Venn diagrams. And one of the things that we were very struck with is that in this world which Facebook has created, while any individual player, any company, any person has visibility only into their network and maybe their, you know, network's network, Facebook has visibility into its all, everything. And in fact, that's the basis of the revenue machine that Facebook has set up, because they've created this wonderful marketing tool for marketers and social activists and others who want to make use of this either to connect to customers or to connect to, you know, like-minded people or whatever. It's absolutely terrific. But it is something that you have to understand if you're a user of Facebook, so that you are careful about how you use it. Now, one of the most interesting ways that we think it's important that people be careful has to do with children. And this is a really thorny subject, and I hope it will come up on the panel. I'm sure it will. But, you know, we found last year, and it actually, I'll tell you, we actually played this down in the article that we published, but it ended up kind of being the lead in everybody's story last year, was this figure that, you know, it was the number of minors on Facebook who were actively using Facebook and were younger than 13, which is actually in violation of Facebook's terms of service. And we said, gee, this is, you know, a bad thing, and parents should do a better job of policing their kids. Now, to its credit, actually, Facebook, you know, took this seriously and made some you know, efforts to be more careful about this. And interestingly, this popped up in our survey, which is that according to our survey, they've closed a number of these accounts, but we saw, you know, many fewer. I'm sorry, 7.5 million were younger than 13, and this year we saw 5.6 million. That's a significant difference. And, you know, surveys are crude instruments, but it's a significant difference. We were delighted to see it. And we'd be happy to, you know, have some clarification either on how, you know, from the authorities as to how to handle this. And failing that, I think that the onus is on parents as well as providers to try to do a better job of policing this. And I know that's a complicated subject, and it's one that will come up in the panel. But actually, before I go on, I also would like to point out, if I could, Andrew Noyes is here, who is the manager. He's in the blue sweater in the second row here. And Andrew is the manager of public policy communications for Facebook in D.C. So any of you who are here from the media, and I know there's some, by all means, you know, grab Andrew after the occasion if you want to hear another view of some of these things that we're saying. I also want to recognize, if I can, Jeff Jarvis, who's down here in the front row, is a former colleague of mine. We actually, today we got picked up wonderfully in the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times, Bloomberg, MSNBC, and others. And probably the one that, you know, what's the right, Jeff's piece on this, where he basically said Consumer Reports is creating a moral panic, was, I thought, it's one of the points that I think, again, is going to be discussed here tonight, and it's absolutely important that this be debated. Just to be clear, we don't think so. We think we're exercising very reasonable cautions, and I think it's also important to understand that when Consumer Reports talks, we are actually not so much, it's not that the Craig Newmarks or the Jeff Jarvises of the world won't get some value out of us. We hope they do. I am not sure that we can tell the Craig Newmarks and the Jeff Jarvises of the world anything about social media that they don't know. They probably could tell us some things that we don't know, and I'm sure we'll hear it if that's the case. But, you know, but we are talking to a very large audience with Consumer Reports. We reach 4 million people with our magazine. We reach 3.3 million people with our website. We have almost 9 million people who are subscribers of ours, and many times that number who we communicate with one way or the other during the year. And while a number of these people are quite sophisticated, many of them are not, and it's something that we feel is important to get out there. So I just wanted to add those. Now there's one other thing I want to show you before I quit, and then I will quit and we'll get on to our main event here, which is, whoops, I went too far. This is a screen grab from a piece of work which was done by the Consumer Reports video group, many members of whom are in the back of the room running the controls here tonight. And I just wanted to show you, to sort of underscore why we think it's important that people understand how to use the tools in this medium. And remember that the tools evolve very quickly, too. Brian, maybe you could run that for everybody. We won't do the whole thing, but you'll get a taste of it.
Maybe you don't want everyone to be able to see photos of your kids, or you don't want your boss to know exactly what you had to drink last night. You can use Facebook's privacy controls to help protect your personal information. It can be complicated, but stay with me. You can do it. To get started, look below the cover photo and click on the Update Info box. The next page allows you to edit your personal information. If, for example, you don't want people to see certain photos, click on About on the upper left corner and choose Photos. If the photo album has an icon with an arrow below it, click on it. Then select who you want to be able to see that info. If the photo album doesn't have a clickable icon, then select the photo you want to restrict. There will be an icon on the upper right that you can click on to make changes. However, there are some things you can't restrict. Your name, timeline cover photo, and profile picture must remain accessible to everyone on the web.
And by the way, this is just the beginning. This thing goes on for, I don't know, 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something. It's long. And every time you think, oh, now I got it, there's some new little thing you got to learn. My point is just this, that to use this world well, it would be better if you were an expert in that. But not everybody can be, and I think that's sort of the point that we're trying to make. So last point I will make is just this, that we did in our article and press release and so forth offer some points that you yourself can do. But what you see over on the right there is an ad that ran today in Politico, and this is from Consumers Union, which is the policy and action arm of Consumer Reports. And basically we are there making several points about Facebook. We are saying that we commend Facebook, which we do, for having made more information public recently, and they've announced that there's a great deal more information that is similar to a agreement they reached with some of the European privacy authorities that's going to be available to American and Canadian users in the next 6 months or so. That's absolutely terrific. We think there may be more there to do. We are concerned about Facebook's position on whether or not the degree to which others can query and get personal information from them and under what circumstances. And we're also, and this is why that ad says something about users, is we're very concerned that people who are not using the privacy controls at least know they're there and understand how to use them. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Bob Sullivan, my colleague, our colleague from MSNBC. Now, Bob actually is, among other things, besides being at MSNBC, is the author of the Red Tape Chronicles. And the Red Tape Chronicles is a wonderful series that unravels bureaucratic red tape and just does a wonderful job of making life simpler. Bob has also twice been on the bestseller list of the New York Times and has a new book which you just finished, which I will let you mention if it's okay. But we're just so pleased that you could be here tonight and maybe untangle some of this red tape for us for this group. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, and thank you, panelists, for sitting here so patiently. That was a great setup for what we're going to talk about. Indulge me for 30 seconds. So Craig Newmark is still here, and he's complaining about other people named Craig Newmark online. You have no sympathy from me. So many Bob Sullivans you get if you Google that. I was hired to work actually as an intern for Microsoft in 1995 as part of the launch of the Windows 95 team, which had a silly product called MSN News, which very shortly Bill Gates and Tom Brokaw had dinner, and next thing you know, I worked for NBC News. At the time I was an intern, really I was the internet kid. Nobody knew what the internet was. I was the geek they had around and asked them how to do things. So sadly, I can no longer call myself an internet kid. Close. I bring this up because, as has already been mentioned, there's a distinct difference between how older people and younger people feel about this issue. It's dramatic, and we're a little underrepresented in the kid area up here tonight, so I will do my best to hold that tradition. Being the internet kid in the room, I'm going to ask any of, by the way, we're going to do this very, very fast. It's not going to be long speeches by anybody. Let me just introduce really quickly who's here. To my right, starting on the far end, there's Steve Rubel, who's Executive Vice President of EDELMAN, who's a social media expert, and he's active in the privacy debate very much. You should follow him if you want to know anything about social media. Jaime Rushke is from Common Sense Media, a privacy expert focused on children and family. Alfredo Lopez works with May 1st People Link. He's from Brooklyn. He's an activist, a writer, and an organizer. Jeff Chester, who you just see at all of these things, like a bad cold. Can't get rid of him. Works for the Center for Digital Democracy. He's interested in public interest policy, and he's an advocate from Washington, D.C. Over to my left is Linda Woolley from the Direct Marketing Association, who's here on behalf of the Digital Advertising Alliance, who has a background in law. Jules Polonetsky with the Future Privacy Forum, which is a think tank seeking to improve the state of online privacy. And finally, Ashkan Soltani, who's an independent researcher and a former technologist with the Federal Trade Commission. So I'll let them each tell a little bit more about themselves. But back to me being a kid, I'm going to take the kid's point of view for a moment and say, all this privacy discussion is sort of interesting. Not really. Word privacy is boring almost by itself. I have nothing to hide. What's the big deal?
First place, it's not true, and it's partly a myth created by the online ad industry and lobby that young people don't care about privacy, because one of the best researchers out there, Joe Turow, University of Pennsylvania, has done polling research, survey research of young people 18 and above, and in fact, they do care about privacy. Maybe not as much as some of us, but they do care. That's what the polling research shows. And first, if I'm going to kick this off, it's more than privacy. It's about who determines the future of our democracy and digital culture and consumer protection and civil liberties and the fabric of our society. The data collection system that's been created, and we're focusing on one aspect of it, has far-reaching implications, and that's why we all do have to care about it. And I can go on, but I can stop because I don't want to.
And I want you to answer my question. I have nothing to hide. Why should I care
all right,
about
let me
this?
tell you. Without ever asking any of us, the online ad industry, starting in the 90s, but accelerated past the 2000. The Googles and the Facebooks and the Yahoos and the Microsofts, and now joined by the biggest ad agencies, have created a stunning commercial surveillance system all across the world, but principally led in the United States, that collects and analyzes our behavior wherever we are online, our finances, our health, our race, ethnicity, our politics, what our kids do. They turn that information over to the highest bidder and now sell us in real time on ad exchanges without ever asking it, what do we think about this? What does this all mean? Who's benefiting from it? So indeed, you may not have something to hide, but if they knew that you were a person of color, you were delivered an online lead ad that sold you a subprime loan. All right? Or they know what your politics are. So, and now with social media, they have much, much more information about us and our friends. They've created a very powerful system. It's non-transparent. Very few individuals can control it, and we need to regulate it.
Linda?
One of the great tools that the online ad industry has created through the Digital Advertising Alliance gives consumers notice about what's going on with online behaviorally targeted ads. We call them OBA. And allows consumers to opt out of getting online behaviorally targeted ads. I don't know if anybody in the room has seen or noticed a little blue icon in a little triangle that appears on your ads. We serve over 1 trillion of them every month. The little icon is typically accompanied with the words "about ads," and if you click on that as a consumer, you'll get a screen that tells you, why did I get this ad? What's going on here? And then you'll also get a screen that allows you to opt out of behaviorally targeted ads. If you do that, you will not get behaviorally targeted ads on the website that you happen to be on, nor will you get behaviorally targeted ads on any other website that you visit. And if you happen to use different browsers on your computer, you will not get behaviorally targeted ads on whatever browser you happen to use. So it's a pretty nifty tool, and it's something that was completely created by the online advertising industry and completely funded by the online advertising industry.
After people like us made a lot of trouble for you, finally the online ad industry, it's a very ineffective system, and it doesn't respond, Linda, to the larger point, which is this global infrastructure that's been created that has, in fact, interactive advertising applications created by your members that gets through viral marketing, and that's what Facebook does best, because Facebook is nothing more than a viral marketing scheme on digital steroids, if you look at it, that collects your data. The idea that a person can opt out of the system, frankly, is a fallacious notion. Because the most powerful forces are focused on data
then
collection.
Alfredo. Yeah, Linda,
right.
please.
Well, I'm not really sure why it's fallacious that consumers can opt out of it, because you can opt out of it. So I'm not really sure what that's about. The other thing is that I guess I would mention is that going back to your point about why should I care, I think if you did a survey of everybody in the room, everybody outside, everybody at NYU, everybody in New York, and asked the question, are you concerned about online privacy? I am relatively certain that near 100% of people would say yes. And I really don't know who wouldn't say yes to that question. When you drill down deeper, the thing that people are really concerned about is the stuff that was mentioned earlier in the Consumer Reports piece, which is people are concerned about identity theft, they're concerned about bad things happening to their bank account, they're concerned about phishing, they're concerned about just bad things happening to them and to their well-being. Are people concerned about getting targeted ads or getting offers that are relevant to them? Not really, but they're concerned about identity theft. And we're concerned about identity theft too. And I think that the important thing is that Congress needs to separate those two issues. They need to separate privacy from data security. And data security is an enormous big issue. I would separate further data security and cybersecurity. Those are issues that, as public policy people, we should all be concerned about, and Congress should be doing something about those, because those are, I think, things that we can all agree on.
Alfredo, I saw you nodding your head.
Yeah, no, I wanted to answer your, I mean, you said that you are not concerned about your privacy. And, you know, I love you, sweet guy and everything, but you ain't all that important. The reality is that there are many, many, many sectors in the world for whom privacy is essential. So we were talking about disinformation, all of this other stuff, and a lot of the stuff that Jeff was talking about, even some of the things that Linda just mentioned. We need to break these terms down. What exactly does privacy mean? There is a section of privacy that has to do with what's in your wallet, your credit card, and I've been through some of these experiences. They're horrible experiences. You don't want to go through any of that. You want to block that. But there's another kind of privacy that drives the Constitution and that drives democracy. And it is the ability of an individual to have interaction with other groups of people that you include, to change things, to move things along, to express opinions, and to be able to exclude people you don't want hearing what you're doing, including governments. Some people in the United States, Bob, they don't think this is this important. I think it's important because I had the FBI steal one of my servers about a week and a half ago, so I think it's particularly important. But we were talking, Jeff and I, a second ago. You gave some important, statistics. 900 million people on Facebook, 188 in the United States and Canada. Where's the rest of those people? They're using in the democracy movement in Africa, places like that. For those people, privacy is a life and death issue. And the ability to exclude from those communications is fundamental to the movements that they're pushing and fundamental to democracy. I think it's fundamental to the democracy in the United States of America. So I think that privacy goes beyond the protection of ourselves as consumers. It has to do with our functionality as citizens. That's what I think.
Ashkan wants to talk now, too. Go ahead.
Ashkan, please. I'll get you next.
I just want to, again, kind of clarify a bit and break out some of the things we're talking about. Some of the things we're talking about with the ad network tracking and the Facebook kind of data collection of personal information is data collected by a third party or intermediary. This is often not visible to the consumer. This often happens transparently in the background. While I appreciate the DAA icon, it requires that, for example, users click inside of an ad to see that icon, and the data is already transmitted by the time they've actually clicked inside the ad. So, but what we're talking about in general, we're talking about kind of third-party data collection by an intermediary or a third kind of a person that a user doesn't have an experience with. We're also talking about Facebook. Some of the examples with the Consumer Reports described. We were talking about Facebook's facilitation of inadvertent data sharing. So by posting or participating, by not understanding the controls or the tools, you inadvertently share data that you didn't intend to an application, to another party, to someone, your boss, etc. And then finally, there's a third piece, which is we're talking about people knowingly sharing data, participating on social networks like Facebook and Twitter publicly, and then having that information used in a context they didn't expect or are surprised by or they're uncomfortable with. And we can I think it might help to break those three things apart because they can be conflated and each issue has different principles, right? So we have issues of maybe the last one I described can be solved with better education, better understanding, better controls. Maybe the inadvertent stuff might be Facebook could facilitate bringing consumers on board and make sure they understand how the privacy settings work. The passive or transparent data collection, as Craig described, I actually did the Wall Street Journal series that was based on my graduate work, highlighting what third-party tracking occurs. Maybe there can be work to help consumers understand how their data is being collected online in a third-party context, or what data Facebook receives. We see Mozilla has released this tool called Collusion, for example. It helps individuals see what third parties are present in collecting data when you visit a website like Consumer Reports. But fundamentally, I think breaking those three things apart might help us get a better discussion going and a better debate going.
Let me just interrupt and ask a quick question from everybody here. Who's on social networks in the room? How many people here have shared something accidentally or had something shared about them that they didn't expect? There's a problem.
Well, I'd like to share something about an accidental sharing because I think it raises one of the points. You all saw Facebook acquire Instagram for $1 billion. It kind of made everyone remember that sharing photos is a giant part of what people seem to really want to do online. I don't know why. I wouldn't sit down and look at your vacation photos if you asked me to see them. But on Facebook, I'm looking at them. I don't know why. It's interesting. And so there's a great app called Pixable. And all this does is it pulls your photos, and then on your phone, it lets you sort of flip through and, see all the photos of your friends. And it categorizes them, the most popular ones, the most clicked on ones. And it's got two categories at the bottom called tagged ladies and tagged men. I don't know. I guess it's a nice way to, choose what to see. And I'm flipping through, I'm not really paying attention. And I'd completely forgotten that I integrated this with Facebook when I signed up for it. The other day I go to my timeline and I've been sharing. Jules is looking. And it turns out that 3/4 of the time I'm looking at tagged ladies.
Oh my God.
I had no clue. I'm embarrassed. Clearly, I'm hoping in the spirit of Jeff Jarvis, by divulging it here, it will be cleared out. But I think the reality is that I still want to share pictures, and I still want to see your vacation pictures. I don't want to hide or live like the guy who was quoted at the end of the story. Live your life as if anything you share there could be public. I do want to manage my reputation. I want to share and not share. And I think when we look at it as this binary privacy, don't share when you're going on vacation because maybe you'll get robbed, we miss some of the reality that we're living today in a digital world. We're leaving all sorts of trails out there. Go search me. I've got this. I've got that. I have very little control over much of what's out there. What I like about Facebook, and I think we've got to kind of both use the carrot and stick here, is that I put something on a blog, it's there. Yeah, these controls are complicated, but for the first time, it's not a matter of what I have to hide. It's a matter of what I want you to see about me. I get up every day, I decide what I'm going to wear. I wore a jacket today because it was a certain sort of audience. I, shaved today because I thought it was, we all like to put our authentic best foot forward. And it's incumbent on Facebook and the other tools to shape the internet so that we can express ourselves even if we have nothing to hide, even if it's the trivial thing. I want you to see my joke of the day, and I don't want you to see a so if we think about it in terms of shaping reputation as opposed to hiding, I think most people are not on Facebook for privacy. They want control. They want to feel empowered. And look, these tools are hard. I rented a car the other day. I didn't read the guidebook. I got into this machine of death. You could kill people with this thing, right? And I just got in. And I drove. Things were kind of, I had to find the lights, but everything was in the right place. And so I think what we need to do is, apply these design principles so that it's intuitive, so that, the people like me don't accidentally, share that we seem to be looking at, women more than we want to divulge. This is, I think, about usability as much as it is about privacy.
Gilliran, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add that when we work a lot with parents and families, and their parents are often very concerned about teaching their kids how to manage their reputations, and we have a lot of parent tips on our website. But they have serious privacy concerns as well. They're concerned about their kids. What we like to say is that sometimes kids self-reveal before they self-reflect, and that, or another phrase that I like is teenagers are prone to engage in risky behavior. But based on that, parents are concerned about very material things like their children getting into college, their children having jobs, or finding jobs. And it's not just a matter of what their friends see online. There are actual social media background check services out there that you can imagine an employer might want to check, or that a college might want to hire to screen applicants. And based upon if something's wrong on your social media profile, you'll be profiled in a way such that certain opportunities won't be available to you, perhaps without you knowing. And that's a real concern for parents.
Steve?
Bob, I think we're coming at this as an industry the wrong way. We're first and foremost, we look at the buttons. Are the buttons in the right places? Do they do the right things? Are they easy to use? Are they labeled properly? Are they hidden? Are they there? We start with the technology. This is not a technology problem. It's enabled by technology. It's a people problem. It's a behavioral challenge and opportunity. And there's a license, business has a license to lead now. And yes, this issue was created and further enabled by technology. And look, the internet's messy. It's never going to be neat. It's going to be messy every single day. And it's going to get messier. And so I think just what I would suggest is, one is we think about the behaviors and what we want to change. There's an amazing book out now called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg that is absolutely one of the best books I've read in 15, 20 years, that explains how behaviors get created and how they can get changed on a individual, on a organizational, and on a societal level. And I think that that's the problem we need to think about. What is the behavior change that we wish to see? How do we, insert new behaviors in existing cycles that people already have? I think we don't look enough at the psychology of sharing. People don't share content because they want to. It's about the psychology. There's an emotional payoff in everything that people share. Absolutely everything is shared has some sort of emotional payoff. It might be they want to get something off their chest, or they want to look good, or they want to look smart, or they want to look funny, or they want to be first, or whatever. But there is an emotional attachment to that, and I think that we try to address this issue around technology. I think that could be part of the solution, but it really is about people. And I also think it's also done in hindsight instead of looking ahead. We talk about all the things that we're adding to the web and the things that, the ed industry is adding to the web with the banners. That's great. That's yesterday's war. Tomorrow's war is the mobile apps and thinking about what that dynamic looks like and how people use those and what new behaviors those might create. And to be in front of that, and someone has to step up and lead. And I'm thrilled that NGOs are leading, but I think business has a huge opportunity to lead there. And we've seen a direct link. You can find a study on our site between stepping up and leading in privacy and security and trust.
May I mention something about leading?
Just hang on 1 second, and let me let Jeff, who's going to jump out of his seat.
Well, yes,
it's exciting,
yes,
and
that's
we'll get to you.
point.
Yes,
The exercise issue will be the next one. I see you. I want to thank Consumers Reports and Consumers Union, by the way, for their great work over the decades, and particularly this report. The structure of our digital system has been created by the online marketing industry, principally good. We are living in the structure that they have created. They have created structures of data collection and influence, and we have to maneuver through them. We're not told what the rules are. We're not told what the end game is. We're not told about the massive data mining infrastructure. So when you go back home, or you're online now, go look up careers on Facebook and look at ad sales. And you'll see that Facebook is ramped up because it's competing with Google. And look, for example, at what they're doing in terms of data collection for quick service restaurants, for financial service companies, for Fortune 500 in country after country all over the world. look at the mobile marketing system that Google has created. They bought the largest mobile marketing company, AdMob. Look at geofences that they've created. Go look up Placecast and geofences. You're on a 4-block radius. You're being tracked and targeted there. Your friend across the street is being tracked and targeted there. This system that's been created based on the monetization of our data and shaping of our behaviors must be made transparent and accountable, and especially when it comes to Facebook and Google and the biggest companies. These are our new, most powerful media companies. They have to be accountable to the public interest.
Linda?
So a few points. In terms of the thing that Jeff mentioned about the infrastructure that's been created by marketers, the thing that I think is really important to remember is the economy, the economic aspect of the internet. Yes, the internet is a wonderful tool, and it did have its roots in academia, but at this point, the internet contributes over $300 billion. That's at least 2.1% of U.S. GDP, which is pretty amazing. Of that $300 billion, the internet, of that $300 billion that the internet contributes to GDP, 20 billion is in advertising, and another 85 is in e-commerce. So when we talk about tampering with the model of the internet and how it's funded, I think we really have to keep the economy in mind, especially at a time when the economy obviously is not doing so hot. The other thing that I wanted to get back to that Jeff mentioned is this idea that consumers using the internet, and the consumers using the internet is an unbelievable number. I mean, it's like 239 million Americans are using the internet every single day. But the idea that they don't know what the social contract is on the internet, that they don't know that ads support free content on the internet is really kind of crazy. Consumers absolutely know that. And they know that the end game of marketing on the internet is, it's very clear. And you know, if they don't know this, I'll tell you right now. The end game of marketing on the internet is to sell you more and better things at a time when you might be interested in wanting to buy more or better things. It's really very simple. The other point I wanted to make goes to something that Steve had said earlier about business leading the way. I mentioned earlier the ICON program and the ability for consumers to opt out of online behavioral advertising. And we at the Direct Marketing Association absolutely believe that industry should be leading the way. And we have a similar project going right now to migrate the ICON program to mobile apps. That would enable consumers to, A, know what's going on, they'd get notice, and B, opt out of data collection and use. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Okay, by the way, Linda and Jeff will be having an MMF-style discussion during the cocktail party, which will be the highlight of the after party.
Buy tickets.
Alfredo, who I think is very important.
Did you want
Would you like to?
I thought Ashton was.
You go
Sure,
ahead. Yes.
Sure. One, I just wanted to clarify that while I appreciate the opt-out program, just to be clear, the opt-out opts you out of behavioral advertising, right? It doesn't opt you out of tracking, accounting, analytics, so the resultant data trail from your browsing. So the wording and the phrasing is very clear. It opts you out of a very certain thing, which is the display of ads, not the underlying tracking or kind of measurement that happens. And on this point of measurement, I kind of want to tie a little bit of what Steve was saying around it's not the button, stupid. It's it's the psychology, it's the emotional payoff, it's the kind of the user experience. I kind of want to tie that together and kind of understand it actually kind of is about the buttons tied to the psychology, right? The issue of the defaults, right? The issue of what the buttons, where the buttons are placed, how big one button is relative to the other, what the default settings is. Facebook's been incredibly effective in their growth, and I think part of that is understanding kind of what good defaults are, in the sense of good defaults for network effects for them, right? So this is the concept of opt-ins by default for expanded sharing, kind of creating models for example, understanding what language works best for users to click, or when users are more susceptible to a click. I think that this concept of information asymmetries, this concept of advertising that was just described was we can serve you an ad when you're best in the I forgot the language you used, best wanting to buy that item. That you could rephrase that as most susceptible to buying that item under the conditions, right? I can measure, for example, when you're more likely to do something and try to serve you an ad then. I think some of these subtle nudges, like for example, think about your news feed, right? Your news feed, you might have maybe 50 friends updating one status post a day, right? But in the way it's presented in a compact form in aggregate, it actually looks like there's a lot of activity going on at that point in time, and you feel somewhat like you want to reciprocate. Often people have this sense of reciprocation when sharing, so it's set up in a way where you feel compelled to share, or you feel like you want to participate. That, while it may be great for everyone to share, is directly in Facebook's interest, right? And so we might want to just ask about the incentives under these kind of behavioral models, and understand the behavioral economics.
Yeah, afraid I had just 1 second. Lydia, you wanted to dispute a fact there?
Yes, on the issue of collection. If you opt out, if you use the advertising option icon and you opt out, you are also opting out of collection, except for some very narrow exceptions.
Which are?
The market research is one, analytics, and functionality.
So, but my browsing history, my IP address, and my unique cookie is still retained. Is that right?
Yeah.
Your, no, well, it won't be used other than for functionality, functionality, market research, and I forget what I just said.
But just to be clear, so I visit the New York Times and I read a story about dog food, and in that story there's an ad. Now you have a unique cookie on me. The ad is served by your third party, one of your members. I have a unique cookie on me that identifies my browser or device uniquely. I have my IP address, and I have the URL of the page that I visited, which was whatever the story on the Times.
Which is only going to be used to make sure that you have functionality on the New York Times website. You're still going to get, I mean, the one thing that's important to remember is you are still going to get ads. You will not get behaviorally targeted ads.
Right, but
you can opt out of ads.
Absolutely.
So
no,
we need to be clear about that.
I realize that you can't opt out of ads. What I want to opt out of is the recording of my activity when I view something about cat food. I later view a URL that is about, say, a WebMD medicine, and then I later view an automobile ad. That clickstream activity that includes my interest.
It will not be used for the
But it's collected and recorded and tied to a unique identifier, correct or no?
Only for the purpose of that I mentioned. So only for the purpose.
Right.
I mean, there are certain. The internet has to work. You know, I mean, it has to.
You don't have to collect the dossiers, which is why the industry.
There's no dossier.
These are opposed to a meaningful do not track system that many of us are trying to get. You want to be able to continue to collect, right?
The collection is only to make the site that you happen to be on work.
It's more than that.
So let's advance do not track tonight. Like, let's do something real here. Craig said he's going to speak to the powerful guys about better, showing people about tracking and cookies. I would love to see the president's campaign site, which is a smart data site. The campaign does a great job at trying to optimize ads and so forth. And the administration generally has been supportive of do not track. The FTC has been supportive. They hosted a meeting at the White House. It would be a flip of a switch for that site to respect the do not track header when people who are using it in today's browsers, and it's in Firefox, it's coming in the others, to simply don't behaviorally target me. We can continue debating about whether you should be more invisible or not log anything, but it would be such a powerful advance. So if there are any media paying attention, my argument is let's urge them, Craig, echo it maybe, to set the path forward by showing that do not track can be enabled.
Yeah, Alfredo, please.
I do not want to continue the discussion. I mean, I will, because I love doing. But I don't. I want to try to disrupt the continuation of the discussion, based on the idea that business is what has expanded the internet. In my opinion, and this is not personal. I know you think personal, but this is not personal.
No, it's not.
But this perspective that's put forward by many businesses is in fact disinformative. The internet is a mass movement of human beings who have sought to communicate with each other, transcending national borders all over the world. Because as we increasingly view our problems and our difficulties as transcending those borders, we need to talk to each other. We need to understand each other. And I can give you a laundry list of stuff that's happened on the internet that got nothing to do with no business. What has happened is business comes in like it's supposed to do, like it always does. It sees something, it jumps on it, it takes advantage of it, and tries to exploit it. That's what Facebook did. Don't fool yourself for a second about what Facebook is. All of the phenomenon and the power of Facebook, and it's wonderful, is the human beings who have come onto Facebook to interact. It's the people that make the internet work. It's the people that give it the power that it has. Facebook is a marketing company. And so the issue of Facebook and privacy, Bob, this is what I was talking about before. It's an oxymoron, man. You can't have a marketing company talking about privacy. It's like asking the automobile industry to sponsor bicycles for everybody. That's not going to happen.
No,
so
I think it's more like the auto industry sponsoring safe driving.
Or even
I think so, but which they do. So why can't Facebook lead like
absolutely
that?
They can,
Okay.
and that's part of the
Okay.
thing that we have to push for. We have to fight them on them and make sure that they can do that.
But they don't want to do that.
But the natural inclination is that they don't want to do that. When you talk about Facebook, Steve, when you talk about Facebook and you see their thing, what do they say about themselves? See, we get the largest database of human beings and fullest information.
I don't think so. The way I
They
look,
say it.
the way I look at Facebook,
I'll give you
Let
URL.
me explain the best way to look at all these social networks. Log out of the services and see what they say when you go on as an uninitiated user.
Why should I do that?
Because then you see what they say about themselves. Look, first impressions mean a lot, okay? And they say Facebook is a place to connect with you. I believe the expression is to connect you with your friends and interests around the world.
No,
I mean,
Papi,
it's something
no,
to that effect. And look,
that's not what's happening, because that's the initial advertising, Steve.
Read the S1.
That's what you guys
Steve,
do.
Read the IPO. If you read the IPO, and it's clear that it's it's the huge data mining infrastructure.
Sure.
And you see the buildup in terms of advertising and virtual currency revenues from gaming. And going back to what Ashkan said, because I think that's the key point for me. This system has been structured. It's been structured and facilitated. If you go on Facebook and you go on the developers page, you'll see that one of Facebook's goals is, quote, curating our identity. That's how they see our mission. Its mission. And in curating our identity, it is about to help ensure that we give up our information, but that our identity, in fact, is accessed by its most important advertisers, which could be pharmaceutical companies and financial companies and political groups and fast food companies and others.
so what's your view? What's your view on the organ donation initiative? What's your view?
I would not put that I would be an organ donor.
I'm not asking about you. What's your view about what Facebook did?
I have concerns about it, and I have a complaint at the federal. In fact, I have the reporter that wrote about the complaint in this room. We have a complaint, U.S. PIRG and the World Privacy Forum and Center for Digital Democracy, my organization, about data mining by pharmaceutical and health companies on social networks, including Facebook and on the web.
What's your view of what Facebook did?
I am concerned about Facebook's.
Sorry, Bob, to play your role here.
I'm
No,
concerned.
Many Bob
You're doing
Sullivans.
fine.
I am
Many Bob
concerned.
Sullivans,
I am
I figure I
concerned
could be
about
one.
Facebook's expansion in the most sensitive areas of our lives, and this needs to be completely transparent. And there have to be meaningful controls. And then when it comes to finances and politics and health and youth and race and ethnicity, I think a whole different regime is required. So I'm not going to tell them, because they're going to data mine it. I'm not going to tell them I want to be an organ
You think
donor.
their intention was to data mine?
And in order to understand Facebook, you have to
Oh, well,
understand.
well,
Wait a second. You have to understand the field that they've created. and it's worth spending time on, because what's behind the scenes is really what's driving all this, and it's called social media marketing. And Facebook, to its credit, not only has it created a great service for people, but it's created an entire industry. You're living in that industry.
But coming back to
and
your
social media marketing is really about creating applications and services.
So let me get this straight. The organ donation was a marketing.
You're giving information and sharing information without really being aware that that's being done.
Thank you.
I'm done.
At this point, I want to mention that we did invite Facebook's Chief Chief Privacy Officer, Erin Egan, to be here. She declined, but as you know, Andrew is in the audience. So Steve, please respond.
No, I mean, look, this is going to push the envelope every time. There will be something new every week that pushes the envelope, and it's a matter. Look, I love what Craig said about keeping calm. We can't be Angry Birds in this. We can't. Okay, we can't.
Damn.
I'm sorry. I really
That
felt
means
like
I can't move into your neighborhood?
I really felt like I was watching Angry Birds for a second. I'm sorry. But that's how you get a point across on the panel.
But you're living in that industry, and you're defending that industry.
I'm not.
I mean, that's your livelihood,
We
and that's
straddle
fine.
between business and the public, and the minute we violate that contract, we're in trouble. So, we view it both sides.
So the Oregon stuff was really interesting, right? It demonstrates that a very clever way to influence behavior, right? If anything, it demonstrates that there's tremendous ability of this platform to influence social behavior, for better or for worse. It does demonstrate network effects, raising awareness, and in this case, for a lot of public good or potential awareness. I don't think you don't actually register for the donor database. The way you generate awareness with then something like only 3,000 or 5,000 people actually registered the first day, sorry. It's essentially like, it demonstrates that they're able to push or drive or funnel traffic and nudge people in the right direction. And the question is, where do we want people to be nudged? Do we think they're able to judge well for themselves? Maybe
nudging would be turning it on and saying, hey, you should. It's just they enabled the fact that I now easily could, and this, it's this feeling I have. I'm an organ donor. I'm proud of it, right. And all of a sudden they opened up the floodgate to let me do what I want to do.
How is it going to be used in terms of the data mining and analysis, not just of you and your friends and relations? How is it going to be used? Don't you want to know how it's going to be used? Well, how will that piece of information be put together with other pieces of information? Don't you deserve to know and make decisions? I think you do.
I haven't gotten an offer for my kidney yet.
Right.
All right, exactly. $10.
And maybe it won't be used, right? So it's quite possible that it won't be used.
But can we talk about, we're industry supported, so let me just throw in some facts, because I get marketers complaining to me all the time that they can't get the data they want from Facebook, which they get just about everywhere else. So we heard some debate about how the behavioral advertising model enables sharing of data so you get relevant ads across all sorts of sites, and many marketers complain that Facebook doesn't allow that, to their chagrin. Yes, there's a lot of data. It is on Facebook. Companies can come to Facebook and say, what do you got? We want to reach those users. But it's a surprise sometimes for folks to understand that the rules that they enforce as aggressively as they can are that you cannot go ahead and scrape that data and then create a profile. Jules is the organ donor, and show him those ads elsewhere. So that's, I think, something interesting. Now, whether they're doing it to be super private or they just want you coming to them instead of buying the data elsewhere, whatever. But there is a reality that this is actually one of the cross-site sharing behavioral-free zones of the web. And I was just reading an article by a whole bunch of marketers saying, hey, I'm not getting enough data to know whether my ads are working well enough. And it's one of the areas of pushback that they get. The other thing I wanted to mention is just, this is just one of the factoids that just burns with me, because if you follow privacy surveys, you know that 30% of the people muck around with cookies, 40, 50. If the statistic is that 13 million, which is like a fraction of the 180 whatever million folks in the North America on Facebook, if 90-some-odd% of the people have actually adjusted or are well aware of the privacy settings, that's too high. There's no way it's that high. That is like amazing. Every year folks who do privacy studies find that people break up into 3 buckets. You know, that 10 or 15% of us who like, we will be naked if you ask us to take off our clothes, sure. The other 10 or 15% who really would like to move to a mountain. And then most of us who are somewhere in between where like, what's the deal? We want to be pragmatic. Fine, I'll give you some data if I get and I understand what's going on. So if 13%, that's where they're going to be in 5 or 6 years. That is actually an incredibly positive number that only 13 million of this hundreds of millions have not done something or been aware of their settings.
So we only have another couple of minutes up here to discuss, and then there's going to be about 20 minutes for questions. So Gilma, you speak, and then I'm going to take a great leap forward with this panel after you have what you
Sure. I just wanted to add another point that maybe could help clarify some of the issues. Ashkan earlier mentioned something about things being subtle nudges, and I think the word share itself is a subtle nudge. Sharing is such a great thing. We teach our kids it's good to share with others. But sometimes when I'm online, I'm sharing information with my friends. But sometimes when I'm online, there are other parties that are taking information. So a couple years ago, there was, when you were, Facebook launched a service called Facebook Beacon so that you, and that was almost more like the information was being taken. Like you would purchase something, say, on Amazon, or you would rent a movie, and then it would automatically be shared with your friends. But were you really doing that sharing, or was the information more being taken? And so that language of sharing sometimes can cover up what's going on.
Beacon was bad, but do you agree that Newsfeed was good? Because I remember when Newsfeed was turned on, I was like, this is terrible. I do something on my page and everyone will know about it. And Facebook users hated it. Like millions joined groups saying, Facebook, this is stalking, turn this off. And then we kind of all kept going back, getting back, because it was really interesting to see this page that had all this stuff about our friends. It tapped into something, and it's kind of what powered them and created this whole viral drive that has been such a powerful thing around the world. But it was a privacy change. If I had been there, I'd like to think that I had been arguing against it. Like, people should be expressly asked, and I probably would have said no. Like, ask me each time, and then of course it wouldn't have worked. So I think Beacon bad. Buzz bad, but if we're going to advise the next generation of app developers, how do we give them a framework around when is it okay to do something a little new? Don't do things that are going to hurt people or like freak them out, but there was something a little surprising. And so how do we enable room for innovation? I mean, I think that's the serious policy question. How do we ensure bad things are not going to happen, but yet give the creative developer, I don't like that app, did you guys see that app, Girls Near Me, right? You opened it up and it was kind of creepy, but I have another app and it's just people near you, and it's all kinds of people who've publicly shared stuff, hopefully understanding, and you can just see all the tweets. I can, turn this on now, and it's a little voyeuristic, but it's also, wow, I could just see who's saying things about a certain corner, and I don't know if it's good or bad. It's new, and who knows what kind of creative thing. So I think we need to figure out a framework that's going to foster creativity and innovation, but yet, slap back at the beacons and the buzzes.
But if Beacon is bad, or you said Beacon bad, is frictionless sharing, where does that fall on the spectrum? Because sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, because it's pretty much the same thing, right? Yeah. One has an opt-in consent, but it does like you view a social reader and it automatically, passively, in my taxonomy that I described, this is the potential inadvertent third-party sharing or inadvertent non-explicit sharing that I think some people are surprised by. So,
well, I accidentally shared my predilection for the tagged ladies, but I love that Spotify is like opening up all this new music, and that someone's taking on iTunes, and boom, with who could ever take on iTunes? But yet, because of the fact we're sort of casually, every time I play something, I'm letting people know, boom, there's like millions and millions of users who are getting music, and it's pushing back at iTunes. So I think that's tough, but we're going to have to figure out, and maybe it's more sentiment and taste, or I think figuring out that framework. When is it okay to share the tag ladies, and when is it okay to, I guess I might see some music someone didn't intend to share. So far, it seems to be all right.
The frictionless sharing is a really good question. We think about that in our business a lot, and so but I think what has to happen is that all those media companies and everyone who's those 50 or 60 media companies that have embraced frictionless sharing, all of them have a license to lead and to explain exactly beyond just the button and box that people give you, and explain. You know who does this extraordinarily well? Amazon. You know, Amazon does not rely on just they have an integration with Facebook. When you buy something, you have the option to share it, and you can log in with Facebook, and you have that connection. They do not just rely on the box that Facebook gives you, which I think nowadays is like a EULA. Okay, it's like an end-user license agreement. If you ever bought software and you get the 20-page lawyer letter in the software, and no one ever reads that. And if you do, God bless you. Craig may read it because he's a nerd. And so the Facebook, I think that's conditioned us, again, behaviors. That has conditioned us to say, oh, when that pops up, you just click it, and it goes away. And I think that there's some of that conditioning with some of these Facebook boxes that pop up. Oh, when you click it, it just goes away. And it's like a million things you see on your phone. You click it, it goes away. Amazon took the extra step and said, put up a whole page and explained, look, this is exactly the data we collect, which is very little or none, and this is the data that we don't collect, and this is exactly what happens. They took the extra step to lead and showcase that. So I think that with frictionless sharing in particular, that's a technology-enabled benefit and problem. And there needs to be, somebody's got to step up and explain what that means, and everyone else, I think, will follow.
Do you hate social cam? You see what's happening there?
Moving to the question. I'm going to say something.
Oh, Jeff, go ahead.
Linda, you
No,
wanted
Jeff.
to know. Linda had something to say.
I just wanted to say something in response to something you had said, Jules. I'm not sure that we need the big brother of government to set where the goalposts are, or guideposts are on what's acceptable and what's not, and what's good and what's bad. The public has done a pretty good job of figuring that out for themselves. And when the public says, no, we collectively don't like that, it gets pulled down.
But we need government to come in. We need government to come in, especially in the areas of financial services, and online health services, and other sensitive areas of information.
Again, the MMF event will be in 20 minutes in the back, but we have to take questions from the audience now.
I want the record to show I have not interrupted Jeff.
Okay, but what I'm going to do is take a very quick speaker's prerogative and offer two very quick points, one of which is there's a book, I think, here which would really illuminate this conversation for a lot of people. It's called Technopoly. It was written by a fellow named Neil Postman, who's more famous for a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Technopoly says that every single technology that's invented has its own bias. So a telephone obviously nudges people towards making phone calls. Clearly, Facebook nudges people towards sharing, and that's an important thing to understand this element here. And one other point that that Jules brought up, the three categories of people, I might know a slightly different schema for those, but privacy-centric, privacy-sensitive, and privacy-neutral people are those three categories. And Larry Poneman, who does the survey all the time, finds that only 10% of people are privacy-centric, and that means that they're wonks who will actually do things like not get a loyalty card from a supermarket or not get an easy pass. 60% of people say, yes, I care about privacy, but they really don't do anything about it. It's just too hard for them. And then there's 30% of people who have this I have nothing to hide view. They have this very open-minded view. It's this 60%, I think, which is why we fight about this all the time. Because there's this whole group of people who really do care about privacy. They don't know what to do about it. And we need to help them figure that out. And I think we've done a very poor job of that, all of us so far. With that, I want to take some questions.
My name is Jeff Jarvis. I wrote that blog post, and I wrote a book called Public Parts about this. And I could go on forever and will not. Jules said something in press today that better than I probably will, but I think we lose sight at our risk here of the benefits in a society of sharing. Sharing is a social act. It is a generous act. It is an act that pulls us together as people. It lets us connect with each other. It lets us share our knowledge. It lets us connect. It lets us learn things. Sharing is good. So the problem I had with the tone of, for example, the press release of the Consumer Reports piece was that it acted shocked when it said that 4.7 million people had liked a health page, and that could be used against them. Well, I see a society where if I go and like a page about breast cancer, that's a good thing. It was shocked that 2.8 million people had liked a page about gay politics, whatever it was. Well, thank goodness we live in a country where at least that many people will do that. And if someone is bigoted against you for that, the problem is not that you shared it. The problem is not that the opportunity was created. The problem was that some damn bigot came after you as a result. And that's the problem in society we should be working with. There are good intentions here, but those intentions often bring unintended consequences. I just want to spend 1 second on COPPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Couldn't be better consequences. But I think a few things have gone wrong with it. One, we have taught our children to lie, and to lie about their age. And Dana Boyd has done wonderful research on this. I don't know if Craig went into it before I got here from a Guardian event. But she found that, yes, more than half of the children 13 she looked at had a Facebook page, and 3/4 of them, that page had been done by their parents. So this is a regulation that was offered by government the parents didn't want. I talked last night online with a very respected, good friend of mine, NYU professor, who was livid because his 10-year-old was kicked off Google because he was honest about his age. And he was mad at Google, and I had to explain to him, no, it's COPPA. It's COPPA that wants to make an opinion for you, parent, and stops companies. And I think in the end, the unintended consequence is that children are the worst served sector of society online because companies are scared of serving them. We've got to pull back here. The danger in my mind, in the end, is that we risk putting too many fences around this magnificent new tool of openness and empowerment that we have on the internet. The internet's not broken, but there are so many calls by various organizations to try to fix it under the guises of privacy, piracy, pedophilia, security, decency, and even President Sarkozy, civility. Well, my answer to that is we've just begun to use this magnificent tool. It empowers new people to do new things. And I say, keep your hands, please, off our internet.
Well,
the question was?
Gail, please, yeah.
Well, right. Well, I mean, we can talk about COPPA, which is a Child Online Privacy Protection Act, for a bit. And there was, yes, when children's privacy is discussed in Congress, sometimes people talk about pedophilia. People talk about predators. But in 1998, when COPPA was passed, you also had a situation where websites had cartoon characters asking children about their addresses, asking children. Right, this was a study done by Jeff and also echoed by the Federal Trade Commission, asking children about whether their parents owned stocks and bonds. And so in this environment, Congress passed a law that said that you need to ask parents' permission before you collect data from someone you know as a child. And so what's been created is a world where a lot of companies don't want to ask for permission. They have the parent. Facebook has the parent's identity. I think some companies do this, but not all companies do this. And it would be great if more companies did it. And current regulation, the current COPPA regulation is being revised. One of the revisions to it is to expand the ways that parents can give this permission.
It takes away email, and it requires video, fax.
No, it doesn't require them. It allows those new methods. These are all optional methods. When they create new methods, they create more options.
And it'll stop
and
behavioral
one
targeting
of the options
and mobile
that
marketing and other things. Instead of having children under 13 have their data collected based on the one-to-one. My wife and I got COPPA passed in 1998 because already the basic business model of one-to-one marketing, which really is the central force here, was already in place. And as Gamray said, as we documented in our report, Web of Deception, which we gave to the Federal Trade Commission and Congress, kids as young as 2 were being asked to give all this personal information. And if we hadn't passed COPPA, all the extensive data collection practices we talked about today, which now occur, the minute you're 13, you're considered an adult in this country in terms of data collection, would be occurring in the 2 to 13 market. So COPPA has played a very important positive role in protecting the privacy of young people and empowering parents.
So
let's all be brief and we'll get words in.
A world where a parent can go on their social networking profile and manage their children's social networking is a fantastic world. And that's the world that COPPA should allow. And that's the world that the changes to COPPA will open up if the social networking companies are interested in providing that service.
Children are the undocumented immigrants of social media, and we need to figure out some way to legalize them or provide some amnesty, because keeping them out isn't working. Their parents are helping them over the border, and whether it's minimizing the advertising or whatever it is, they're there, they want to be there. We need to figure out a way to make it safe, secure, and an acceptable way, because they're there already.
Yeah, Ashkin, please.
I just want to,
so
just to paraphrase, Jeff, you're saying the problem isn't that people reveal things, but that other people, bad people, exploit what is revealed, right? Is that kind of the gist of it?
That's part of it.
Yeah.
There's certainly not the complete,
But so.
if you try to stop people from revealing, you also stop.
But if you want to deal with the bad people that exploit these things, right? And they're geographically distributed. They're all over the world, and oftentimes people don't realize that they're revealing to these bad people or that these bad people exist. How would you address this? How would you come up with a solution that wants to
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Linda, I think, answered in great measure before. There are already laws on the books that deal with identity theft. There are already laws that deal with pedophilia and identity theft and fraud and those kinds of things. When we try to regulate the technology to get after one behavior and thus regulate all behaviors, that's where the danger is. So in Canada and Australia, there are now efforts to.
I'm not saying regulate. I'm saying if you want to help minimize those issues, if you want to help maybe
to enforce the laws that already exist.
So you want to expand, say, the ability for the FTC to look at people that take user data and use it in a context like FCRA, for example. So perhaps using data that's shared publicly and discriminating for health information is something that for health symptoms. So
I think you know the Dana Boyd example too. If I walk into your office and apply for a job,
right,
you can see in a glance that I have prematurely, damn it, gray hair. You can guess my age. You can know my race. You can guess my ethnicity.
My question is,
let me answer your question. Let me answer your question. You can refuse me the job because I'm an old fart. You get away with that once or twice. But you won't get away with a pattern of that. And that's the way we regulate that now. We regulate the behavior, not the gathering of information. If we start to regulate knowledge, that's a very dangerous position for a society.
Absolutely. I agree.
So we already have these means to regulate the behavior.
I don't want to regulate, though. I just want a solution that you can propose other than regulation that will fix these issues, right? So
enforce the laws that exist.
So expand
no,
enforcement.
Enforce the laws that exist.
It's very, having worked in law enforcement, the capacity of a 20-person staff at the FTC to enforce some of these issues around privacy for multi-billion-dollar companies across the world, I don't think that capacity exists. So what I'm hearing then is not to expand regulation, but expand the ability to enforce.
No, you're trying to guess an expansion of either, and I'm not saying expansion. I don't want to keep the floor going.
Okay. Alfredo?
Privacy, I agree with a lot of the stuff that Jeff said. But I just want to make one point. Privacy is not contradictory to inclusiveness and communications among people. Privacy can enable those things to occur in a vigorous way and a protected way, because they don't always happen that way. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Okay, well, I think we have time for one or two more questions. So, I'm sorry, Jeff. Woman in the front here in the black jacket, right there. Yes.
Hi, sorry. I was wondering if any of you foresee a future in which our identity online is as legally valid as our identity on our driver's licenses.
Sure.
I think Facebook can do a better job at figuring out who your parent is than some of the more legally documented ways. It's really hard to manufacture a true social media identity. It's by creating that sort of a network, and indeed, it may be good enough one day for lots of the things that are useful.
Joe Turow has a new book, and this shows you I am getting. Does anybody remember Joe Turow's new book?
The Daily You.
The Daily You. And Joe Turow is really one of the leading academic experts in new media and online advertising, and very principled. And his new book really looks at how companies are able to take your online identity without really you being informed and discriminate against you. And you can be on the positive side or the negative side of that discrimination, such as getting the bad loan offer or the good loan offer. So companies are already taking your online identity and doing an analysis, as what Facebook and others do, and making assumptions about you, and you are not informed about what that all means. And increasingly, as Joe says, it will shape even the information you have access to.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention about that is that we have, DMA has been in the business of self-regulation for over 40 years, and we've got very strict best practices about what marketing data should be used for. And in brief, it should be used for marketing purposes only. And we've, around the online behavioral advertising issue through the DAA, we've put in place rules that say information that's gleaned from online behaviorally targeted ads absolutely may not be used for anything other than serving more online behaviorally targeted ads. It may not be used for credit. It may not be used for employment. It may not be used for security clearances. It may not be used for health insurance eligibility, and so on and so forth. I mean, there is a long list of things that it should not be, it may not, absolutely may not be used for. And I think, one of my colleagues at the DMA tells a story about when he first joined our staff, which is quite a while ago now, probably close to 20 years ago. We had a situation where Sports Illustrated was actually being sued by the Internal Revenue Service. And our answer to any of our members when they're asked for information about their records by a government agency is just say no. They absolutely have to get a subpoena, and go make them get a subpoena. Don't turn over anything to them because it's marketing data for marketing purposes. Anyway, the story was that Sports Illustrated was being sued by IRS because they wanted their subscription list, because IRS was absolutely convinced that there were a number of tax scofflaws among their subscribers. And if they just had this list, they would be able to find out who those people were. Well, turns out there were a number of people on the subscription list who were not paying taxes, and they all turned out to be 13-year-old boys. So it just is kind of illustrates the point about marketing data is for marketing purposes. It's not for anything else.
And just to, there is a project called the National Secure Trusted, NSTIC, National Secure Trusted Identity for Strategy for what you just, and it's this attempt to build this, basically a trusted identity that you could use online.
Okay, in the back over here, the woman in the gray sweater, please, yes. Wait for the microphone if you would. Yeah.
But don't touch it.
My question is, when are people going to start using our sharing against us, just like the same thing that you're talking about? When I don't pay my cable bill, when are these companies going to, or creditors, come after individuals through social media and stuff like that? And who's going to regulate that in the future?
So who wants to talk about whether or not creditors use social media to chase down people who haven't paid their bills?
Well, they do.
Yeah, that is happening.
They do. It is happening.
Did you pay your credit bill this month?
It is happening, and that's one of the things you do have to be concerned about using Facebook and social media. I mean, there's a whole industry that's developed data scrapers that are doing that, and there's a very robust infrastructure around online finance. So you have to be worried about, and you have to be worried about campaigns where you're being smeared as well. People are concerned about that as well.
But luckily, you can block them in a way you can't. That bill that they send you saying, if you don't pay, we're gonna, come collecting. You can just block them, and you won't hear from them on Facebook.
Also, if you haven't paid your credit card bill, they don't need to use social media to come after you.
But they're all
They're doing it, though.
Social media surveillance. It's part of the social media marketing, and it's one of the areas of concern here, because it's now very affordable, but all the big companies and the political campaigns are constantly analyzing the posts on Facebook and on Twitter, et cetera, to understand the sentiment, to understand the flow of relations, to identify who's the influencer among the node of friends, and that influence will be targeted. So there's a whole infrastructure of commercial surveillance, which is part of the Facebook economy, that we need to be concerned about.
Okay, I wish we had infinite time for questions. There's obviously lots of energy, and there will be plenty of time afterwards, but I promised everyone here that they would get a last word. I also made them promise the last word would be very brief. So, starting with Steve, give me your last word.
Ultimately, it's about who's going to step up and lead. I think that it will be business, not government. The technology industry is the most trusted industry in the world, according to our data. Has been for many years now. You can find that on our site, and we think the technology industry will lead, but the way to lead is not around technology, it's around people and behaviors, and encouraging and rewarding good behaviors.
Thank you.
Sure. One of the statistics that was mentioned earlier was that a lot of the parents of preteens on Facebook did not discuss online behavior with their kids, or did nothing to keep up with their kids' practices online. And parents, if you need help doing that, you can look. Our website has information for you. Please do discuss these things with your kids. We know that oftentimes parents work with kids to get them access to services that they might not be able to get access to. So if you follow some of our guidelines, we can help you to do that in a safer and more effective way.
Alfredo.
The entire world is pushing for democracy. The internet is the tool of democracy. Privacy is the nurturer of democracy. All these things must be protected. Government will not protect Business will not protect. They have their own interest and agenda. Movements of people are what will be protecting privacy, the functionality of the internet, and the democracy that the entire world seeks.
You know, Craig mentioned that the internet didn't have a lobby, and in addition to the people, the internet does have a lobby. You know, the Electronic Privacy Information Center, Consumers Union, and I want to thank them once again for this magazine special issue. The ACLU, Consumer Federation of America, Free Press, Electronic Frontier Foundation, Center for Democracy and Technology, and others. There are a group of dedicated organizations in Washington and across the country, and indeed across the world, that are fighting against the closing of the internet for SIPA, that are fighting for privacy, that are fighting to limit the amount of data that governments can collect and try to protect consumers as well. And all those organizations, some of which are represented here, I hope deserve your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda?
Thanks. The technology industry has produced a lot of marvelous, wonderful things for consumers, and at the same time supported a huge amount of the economy. And I think we need to be very careful about taking information out of the information economy.
I think data isn't good or isn't bad. It's knowledge, and we need to make sure that we optimize for the future of this world the benefits, the discoveries, the researches, the cures, the things that we are going to learn by analyzing all kinds of ways that traffic can be managed, that diseases can be cured, that people can be more powerful in getting the information they need at their tips. But I also recognize that data is something that can be used against you. Your world can be narrowed. Your political viewpoints can be boxed in. You can be marketed in an intrusive way. You can lose opportunities. You can also gain opportunities, be found, and be discovered. And getting this balance right, there are heated emotions on either side, but the businesses here aren't all evil looking to brainwash you, and the advocates aren't all wrong, you know, shooting at imaginary, you know, goblins. These are legitimate concerns on each side, and reasonable people need to figure out how we can have our cake and eat it too. That's what technology should let us do.
Yeah, and I would just echo that. Privacy is a very kind of complex notion. I think we should try to be very clear on what we're talking about. And, you know, are we talking about the passive data collection? Well, maybe we should raise awareness, or we should allow better control tools. Are we talking about inadvertent disclosure, right? Maybe we want to, you know, go after the bad actors that are using that information, or prevent users, educate users. Are we talking about creating non-corporate communication channels? Maybe we should come up with other ways to communicate that are kind of available publicly. You know, we really, if you view privacy as regret management, right? You want to prevent people from doing things that they regret, but you want to allow them to exist in this complex ecosystem. We want to figure out who the best person is to help facilitate or reduce that regret, and facilitate the regret management. And we should focus on that by being as clear as we can.
I want to thank the panel for mostly behaving. I really appreciate it. And I also just want to make one last important mention, which is my email address is bob.sullivan@msnbc.com. And if you find yourself in a situation where you really need to tell a journalist something that nobody else knows about, bob.sullivan@msnbc.com. Thank you.